everyone. I'm Rebecca Weber. Welcome back to your AMAC podcast, Better for America. And today we are back to the Reb and Rob show with AMAC's national spokesman, Robert Charles, or Bobby Charles, as many of you know him. Bobby, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. It's such a joy to have you with me here today. Thanks for joining.
I have to tell you, Rebecca, this show is one of the highlights of my month. So I'm always on board and I'm excited to be here.
Now, you have been professionally involved in all three branches of federal government, the executive, legislative, and judicial, and one of the most compelling jobs that you held was as chief counsel and staff director to the largest part of the House Oversight Committee. In that capacity, you zeroed in on the Justice Department when you took over in 1995, and you pressed them hard for 5 years, beginning with an investigation into the role of then Attorney General Janet Reno and the FBI at the Waco disaster. So I'm really interested to get your thoughts and your take on Twitter's suppression of information, their decision to permanently ban a sitting president, to suppress an aid in the cover-up of the Hunter Biden laptop, all of which is now being released by Elon Musk. So my question, Bobby, is as we look forward, what do you think are the longer-term implications of all of this?
We're living in a very revealing moment. And I have to say, Elon Musk has become Mr. First Amendment. Thank God there is a Mr. First Amendment out there, and that he's gotten to Twitter and opened the doors so that all the Americans who have a right to know have and can see what's in there. But I will tell you that I think, it's like peeling back the layers of an onion. What we're seeing is that the people who dumped President Trump off Twitter were violating their own policies. He violated no policy. All he did is speak out. In fact, his speaking out was far less egregious than many of the people they kept on Twitter. But he spoke out, and the activists within that organization decided that they would knock him off Twitter. Now, that occurred when he was a sitting president, but that's not the big point. The big point is that you have to ask, why were they so animated to knock him off? Why did that happen? And the answer goes back months prior to that, because, of course, what Donald Trump had done is he'd been speaking the truth about the Hunter Biden laptop, which affected the election of 2020. And we don't relitigate elections. We're done with 2020. We're done with 1960. We're done with these elections. But we can get accountability, Rebecca. And what that really points to is two very critical items. One is that what was on that laptop corroborates that Joe Biden, forget about Hunter Biden, but that Joe Biden, as a vice president of the United States, took his son to Ukraine and to China, secured multi-million-dollar contracts for the selling of influence. It's obvious. There's nothing else that he could have been selling. He didn't have the capability to sell anything else. And that laptop, and what it reveals is that they were thanking the son for having brought them, particularly the Ukrainians, but we can say probably also the Chinese, into contact with the father, and basically thanking them for having sold the influence that he sold. Why is that important? That's important because that's illegal. We have federal statutes that say you can't be bribed as a federal official or you're violating the law. So the first big issue is whether Joe Biden violated the law. The second big issue is the cover-up. And what is the cover-up? The cover-up, I mean, as far as we know already from what Twitter has released, the FBI was in cahoots with at least Facebook, if not Twitter, telling them to not publish in 2020 the material that they knew to be true, because they had that laptop since 2019, the stuff that would be implicating Joe Biden in criminal activity. And who was doing that? Well, it had to be the counsel's office. And who was the counsel? Mr. Baker. And where does Mr. Baker end up? He ends up being the counsel for Twitter. So we're learning an awful lot from Elon Musk's revelations. And what it tells us, is not that we can relitigate, but what it does tell us is that we have a right to know what our government is doing. And if there were criminal violations, then people who are private citizens need to be prosecuted for those criminal violations, and people who are in public office, and it might be the Attorney General and it might be the President, need to have the word impeachment discussed in the same sentence.
All very serious stuff, really serious. Let me ask you, where does all of this lead, in your opinion? Can Congress, the Republican-led House, get to the bottom of this? And assuming that they can, Bobby, what do you expect might happen next?
What they need to do in the Oversight Committee is they need to aggressively, and they may need to pull some outside people in, but aggressively go after all the information that they can get out of the Justice Department, the FBI, the White House, and all of the parties that had inside knowledge. Of course, you can bring the private sector into this too, the high-tech folks, and get at the truth. At that point, you do criminal referrals. Interestingly, it's like following breadcrumbs, Rebecca. What's going to happen is they're going to do criminal referrals if they find criminal activity. Those go to the Attorney General of the United States. And we sent criminal referrals at the time, back in the 1990s. We sent criminal referrals to a Democrat Attorney General. At that time, it was Janet Reno. Now it's Merrick Garland. Probably Merrick Garland, who has made it very clear that he's a kind of a bitter old man. He wishes he was on the Supreme Court. He didn't get there. And now he's decided he's not going to protect Supreme Court justices. He's become very political. Well, is he going to act on criminal referrals? Probably not. So if he doesn't act on the criminal referrals, what comes next? Well, the answer is, at that point, the House can initiate impeachment proceedings for failure to do your duty. And obviously, we're already talking about that for the Secretary of Homeland Security. But, and will those go anywhere in the Senate? Probably not. But the American people at least will understand that there is a warfighter for truth in their corner in the House, and ultimately they will get information that will inform them for 2024 whether or not those criminal referrals ever turn into indictments.
Yeah. Well, it's clear that Twitter was very successful covering up the entire Hunter Biden laptop story. We know that there is a direct relationship between the laptop and the business dealings of Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. I agree with you that the American people need that transparency. We ought to know. My question for you, my next question is, do you think that any state attorneys generals have a standing to also bring a suit related to election integrity? Because this certainly had an impact. I mean, the public was not aware. And when people are polled today to say, if you had known, that's a pretty big number of people that said, yeah, that may have influenced my decision to vote for Joe Biden as president.
Of all the, Rebecca, apologize for interrupting. Of all the questions you've asked, that might be the most poignant one of all. And I'll tell you why. While the criminality associated with bribery under, I think, 18 U.S.C. 245 is truly important, the idea of election interference, which is the criminal statute 18 U.S.C. 201, is really important, because elections are everything. I mean, if we can't believe in the election process, people will stop voting. Okay, so we need to believe in our election process. That federal statute is the one that we would expect someone like Merrick Garland to act on. However, if Merrick Garland does not act on that, a very legitimate question, since states also have laws against election interference, it's very possible that either one attorney general or different states' attorneys general could join together to bring a lawsuit that makes clear that they feel that what occurred, whether it was the FBI propagating it, someone in the private sector propagating it, the other campaign propagating it, individual organizations propagating it, that somewhere along the line there was an intent to interfere in this election.
So my concern about these things, the Twitter revelations, the Twitter files, is I think public opinion could play into how all of this unfolds, especially today, many years later, after we still see, the Russia collusion, which we know is false, the FBI entering into Donald Trump's home, rifling through his son's bedroom, his wife's bedroom, and all of the false stories around Donald Trump. How much do you think public opinion could play into all of this? And for those Americans who have lost faith in our institutions and in our justice system, where is their hope as we look at this turn of events?
I'm a student of the founding period. I went to school learning about that. I read the Federalist Papers. And, our founding fathers worried first about the corruption of the process. They wondered whether the Republic would persevere because for several reasons. They imagined that it's possible that people got into power would try to buy votes. They worried that public corruption would penetrate the senior reaches of the government. They worried that power would become an aphrodisiac and these people would lose all their presence of mind. But most of all, they worried about, and they really, it was a very fraught understanding of how they worked to create the Electoral College and how the voting process worked, because ultimately, the foundation upon which a republic stands always is the election process, which must be informed by truth. And Thomas Jefferson was very vigorous in his defense of truth. He didn't even like the idea that you would propagate fiction stories. I mean, he really liked the idea that news should be news without any entertainment value at all, that it should be all about the facts. And the problem that we've got, Rebecca, is that truth is the first casualty here. And it isn't about Donald Trump. It really isn't. It isn't about it. I mean, the reason people like Donald Trump, if they do, is that he was a disruptor. He came in and said, you know what? When the system starts to slide sideways and we could get an avalanche in the wrong direction, you have to start picking up rocks and showing people that this is going the wrong direction. We're headed the wrong way here. And it could be others. Mr. DeSantis, could be Mr. Cotton, could be 100 other people. But the reality is that the republic is what we're really talking about. And election integrity is at the center of the republic. And these events, this Twitter set of revelations and hopefully oversight hearings, point us back to the idea that if we lose the election process and the integrity and the truth around it, then we lose everything. List me the top 100 issues. The border's a problem. Drugs are a problem. Parents being excluded from the school system is a problem. But it all comes back to the idea of whether or not we're living in a society in which our leaders are accountable. And if they are not accountable, if we have a system that's run amok in such a way that people cannot trust the people that they are putting in office or trust the process by which they get into office, then people are going to pull back and not vote. And they're going to give up on the system. And that would be far worse than any one of the policy mistakes that the Biden administration has made. We need to believe in our process. Our process, our Constitution is it's the template. And if we lose that, then we've lost the entire country. So is it important? Yeah, it's terribly important. That's why accountability is important. That's why oversight is important. That's why if there are prosecutions to be had so that we hold people accountable and deter this behavior in the future, it's important.
It sure is. Wow, that was very, very well said, Bobby. As always, thank you so very much. This is such a serious moment for the Republic, and the key feature has to be elevating uncontested facts and really informing the American people, even if the Democrat-controlled Senate doesn't act on any impeachments and the Democrat Justice Department doesn't prosecute their own. So, Bobby, thank you so much for being with us today. And to all of our AMACers listening, thank you for tuning in. Download the AMAC News app and watch and listen to Better for America, where you can track breaking news with all the information you need and the ease that you want. And make sure to hit that subscribe button, follow, like, and share wherever you are on social media. Until next time, I'm Rebecca Weber. This is your podcast, Better for America. Thank you for being here. God bless you. Merry Christmas and happy holidays to all. Have a great evening, everyone.